to hear about these motherfuckers. It's time to go. All I want to do is fucking eat.
We're not practicing to beat somebody. We're practicing to beat everybody.
Nowhere to run and nowhere to hide for 4 quarters. They got to see us in our house for 4 quarters. They got to look us in the eye for 4. This is about us and our family and our house. This is about us. This is our mentality. We ain't backing down. We ain't running. Set a tone, send a message. This is our house. Physical toughness wins in football now. And if you in this room, you got it. If you come in here, you better believe in it. Because this physical toughness is what makes the difference. Elite focus. That's all I do to the guy across from me. I'm fixing to whip his ass. Not in my box. Not today. It's about us. It's about our family. We attack. You take that helmet and you strike them. And you strike them and you strike them. That's how you get respect.
Now I am going to pick shit out of them. Physically, I want to break them.
Let's create a monster. Piercing together something from your nightmare. It has to be fast. No, faster than fast. Hurdling defenders in a single swift. Stronger than the average man.
Carter's gonna get sacked again.
A toughness that you can feel in your soul. He has to be smart. Yeah. An intelligence nobody can keep up with. Pinpoint accuracy that leaves no mercy. Physically and mentally unstoppable.
He left his feet. No
It's done. I give you the class of 24.
Happy National Signing Day, everybody. Welcome back into this edition of How About That Dogs Cast. We're going to take a look at all of the excitement, and man, has there been some excitement here in 2024 when it comes to National Signing Day. Let's just start at the beginning. Last night, I was sitting in this exact space, doing my work as you do, and I started to hear some rumblings about a certain 5-star defensive player that had given his commitment to a different school back in the summer. And at the time, it really stung for the Georgia Bulldogs and Dog Nation. And I had kind of moved on. I had let myself get over the fact that that's just the world we're in. NIL is what it is. Kids just want to play at other places for various reasons. It's all good. I wanted to cheer for the guys that wanted to be Georgia Bulldogs. And if you don't want to be a Georgia Bulldog, that's okay. Best of luck to you. We'll see you on the field. That is where I had settled. But then last night, a little rumbling, a little shaking, and I found myself pulled right back in to the entire drama. And I was completely open to the fact that it could end up just like this again.
Bruh.
But if it went our way, I could be feeling like this.
Oh my God.
Either way, for Dog Nation or for a couple of other schools, we were all opening ourselves right back up to another possibility of some more
Emotional damage.
But that's why we follow the sport. That's why we follow recruiting, especially in today's recruiting landscape. So, signing day comes, players start to sign. And it's a good day for the University of Georgia. Things are going well. Players that have been committed for a while are signing on the dotted line and saying, yes, sir, I want to be a Georgia Bulldog. And at the end of the day, the Dogs were sitting there with the number 1 ranked class in 2 of the 3 major reporting companies. 247, ESPN, they both have the Dogs at number 1. Rivals, I believe, has the Dogs at number 2. But any way you cut it, it was going to be a good day for the Georgia Bulldogs. And then the unexpected happens. Well, unexpected for many. I mean, the Dogs were already sitting on the number one class in the country. They had already signed 5-star players at multiple positions. They had already signed massive bodies to fill in the trenches along the lines of scrimmage. And then we start to get a little bit more information, and it happened. KJ Bolden decided that he was going to be a Georgia Bulldog. The 5-star plus safety out of Buford flips on signing day to join Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs. It's like Kirby told us back at SEC Media Days, and he was talking about every facet of the program. Sometimes when we hear his catchphrases, it comes off as we're talking about for game day, or we're talking about for a player's development, or whatever it is. But no, when Kirby gives us these nuggets, these mantras, they apply to everything within the program at the University of Georgia. And at SEC Media Days, he said, better never rests. He said that coming off the heels of back-to-back national titles, and people were worried about complacency. Everybody was. But what we didn't know at the time was not only was he talking about player development and trying to push the program forward and achieve greater heights, he was also talking about recruiting. Well, of course he was. Why didn't we know that? Why didn't we just put it together then? I didn't. But the study and the saga of the recruitment of KJ Bolden is a prime example that better never rests everywhere within the University of Georgia football program. KJ made his announcement back in August that he was going to go to Florida State University. At the time, he said it was his dream school. And Georgia thought they had a good chance to land him at that commitment, but it didn't happen. But that was truly when the recruitment of KJ Bolden began. Now, I know Kirby has had him on campus since he was a 9th grader. I know that he's been to Athens somewhere near 20 times. But this was a player at a position of need that was the very best in the country. The number 1 rated safety in the United States of America was here in Georgia. And Georgia needed that player at that position. And he had just committed to Florida State. But that is when the recruitment started. From that point until today, when KJ Bolden signed his letter of intent and his NIL commitment at the University of Georgia, that effort, constant contact, constantly working on relationships and selling what the University of Georgia program is about is what brought KJ to Athens ultimately, in his words. Better never rests. And then all of Dog Nation says, hallelujah, welcome. Because you want this kind of player because they're fantastic players. But because of the relationship Kirby's had with KJ, we know the kind of person he is too. And let's just say that Georgia got a good one when KJ Bolden decided to come and play for the Dogs. Now, that was the big splash of the day. That was the biggest splash of the day in college football anywhere across the country. I mean, you can't do better than the number 1 player at a position of need that is ranked as a 5-star plus prospect, changing his commitment on National Signing Day. That's bound to make waves. That was the big news. But there's so much more to talk about when you talk about this recruiting class for the University of Georgia. As I mentioned, 2 of the 3 major reporting companies have the Dogs as the number 1 overall class. This is a class, especially defensively, that is absolutely loaded. The Dogs today signed the number 1 cornerback in the country, the number 1 safety in the country, and the number 1 linebacker in the country, as well as several monsters along the trenches along the defensive line. This class is loaded. Doesn't matter how you slice it. But there were a couple of places that I really thought the Dogs needed players. They needed impact players, and they needed them to be able to contribute immediately. That is the world that we live in, thanks to the transfer portal and things like that. So let's look. The couple of areas that stood out to me, and again, top to bottom, a total of 28 signees. This Georgia Bulldogs class is very, very, very good, as everyone recognizes them having the number one class in the country. But here's a couple that stood out to me in particular. A couple of positions. At defensive back, the Dogs signed Ellis Robinson. Now, this is not just another player. This is a cat that left the Great White North, came south to find out just how good he was playing against better competition at MIG Academy. Ellis Robinson is a 5-star cornerback, the number 1 cornerback in the country, the number 8 player overall in the country, according to one source. Another source has him as the number 1 player in the country. He committed to the Dogs a long time ago, was solid the entire way, signed today, and is going to compete immediately for playing time in Athens. Doesn't mean he's going to start day one, but you will see him on the field. He's too good an athlete for him to not be there in some capacity or another. We just talked about KJ Bolden, the number 1 safety in the country, a homegrown product, a Georgia kid that has decided to stick and stay here in Athens and play with the Dogs. KJ, there was a lot of, I don't know what the right word here is, angst maybe, about his earlier decision to commit to Florida State, because yet again, it appeared that another kid out of Buford, which Georgia's notoriously had a bad track record as far as recruiting football players to come to Athens, out of that particular high school. And they were like, many Georgia fans said, well, here we go again, another Buford kid strings us along, doesn't commit to the Dogs, and we miss out on a top flight player. But this time was different ultimately. Yes, he committed to Florida State back then, but at the end of the day, he wound up being a Bulldog. So, say what you will about the Buford curse. I've never really said a whole lot about it one way or another. I don't think, I personally don't have much of a feeling. If you feel like it's a thing, well, then just look at today as something that strikes against that. But either way, KJ Bolden is now a Georgia Bulldog. So you have the number 1 corner at DB in this class, the number 1 safety, and the 12th ranked player overall in this class in KJ Bolden. But you also have another 4-star corner in Andre Evans, the number 11 corner in the country and the 87th ranked player overall nationally. He's a big body, a heavy hitter, really physical, but he's also long and speedy. So that's going to add serious talent and depth to that DB room here in 2024. Then there's a down south Georgia boy by the name of DeMello Jones, who is a 4-star. They have him as an athlete, but most likely going to be a safety at the next level. I mean, we'll see. He was the number 4 athlete in the country and the 130th ranked player nationally. When you look at that group together, Robinson, Bolden, Evans, and Jones, it is hard to remember when the Dogs signed a better group of DBs top to bottom than that group. The other group I'd like to take a second and point to would be the linebacker class. Now, I've already mentioned to you Justin Williams. Justin Williams is a kid out of Texas, and the Dogs were in a fight with Oregon and Texas and everybody else for a long time. But at the end, it seemed to come down to Oregon, and then late, Texas made a push at him, throw in all kinds of stuff his way. But Justin decided he wanted to be a Dog, and he signed on the dotted line today, a 5-star linebacker, a Butkus Award candidate in high school, the number 1 overall linebacker in the country in this class, and the number 11 player overall. Justin Williams is going to be a player that is going to push for time in 2024. I'm not saying he's going to start at linebacker. I'm not saying he's going to take major reps earlier in the year, but he's going to see the field. Special teams is a place where a kid like Justin can get on the field immediately and make an impact for Georgia. Along with Justin, you have Chris Cole, a 4-star player who was the 5th ranked outside linebacker in the country and the 66th ranked player overall nationally. Now, these numbers, when I give you the position rankings and the national rankings, those are the rivals numbers. I had those most accessible, so that's what I went with, just so we're clear. So in this class, it's Justin Williams and Chris Cole. And then on top of that, they signed Christopher Jones today, another 4-star player, the number 7 inside linebacker in the country, the number 114th nationally ranked player. The Dogs, again, with Glenn Schumann at the helm, have hauled in a staggering amount of talent at the linebacker position. The linebacker room at the University of Georgia is quite possibly the best, hands down, in the country. And I don't think it's particularly close. So there's been some roster movement in that room for Georgia over the last couple of weeks. Let's just say the cupboards are not bare, and these young players are going to make their names known sooner rather than later. I've rattled off a bunch of numbers to you there, but just hear this one. If that's too many numbers, just hear this one. There are 15 signees of the 28, so more than half of Georgia's signees today are in the Rivals' top 250 players in the country. That's a staggering sort of number when you think about it. And how do you do that? Yes, you land the splash players, right? You get the big name guys that we've talked about already. But that's not the only place that Georgia both addressed needs as well as added depth. And the next place I want to turn and look at too, again, the DBs and the LBs really stand out to me here. But the other positions, they got plenty of attention as well. So along the offensive and defensive line, the Dogs addressed a need as far as depth, but also size. The offensive line especially. The defensive line players that were brought in this class can do a little bit of everything. There are inside-outside guys. There are guys that can slide along the defensive line. They have size. They have speed and athleticism. Just among the offensive and defensive lines, period, the Dogs signed 8 4-star players. So there is plenty of talent coming in this class for the Dogs. Running back was another position that we saw in 2023. You just can't have enough running backs. And the University of Georgia, well, they saw it too and addressed that, going out and signing 3 4-star players at the running back position, including the overall number 1 all-purpose back in Nathaniel Frazier out of California. They got a couple of bigger, but they got Chauncey Bowens, who is a bit of a bigger body, who also has some speed. And then they got Dwight Phillips, who is an absolute electric track star speed kind of running back. So they did a little bit of everything here. They addressed the home run play from the running back position. They addressed pass catching from the running back position. They addressed the guy that can bang it in there and get you the tough yards when you need them in this class for the running back position. And then they got another guy who is an absolute game breaker when you look at his speed. So, 28 overall signees. The Dogs addressed needs. They addressed their depth concerns. And they also, and again, I mentioned it earlier, but let's just look at it right here. They addressed what they needed to address as far as maintaining their position in the sport of football. After winning a crazy amount of games consecutively, after back-to-back national championships, after 3 consecutive 12-0 regular seasons, somehow people have looked at what's happened involving the University of Georgia over the last 2 to 3 weeks and figured out they just wanted to tell themselves that Georgia was somehow falling off a cliff, that Georgia was somehow down bad because they lost one game by 3 points with a roster that was, shall we say, not fully healthy. No excuses, simple reality. They lost a hard-fought game by 3 points. There's been some movement on the roster since that game. And people just really so badly wanted to believe that Georgia was somehow going to go away. Friends, I'm here to tell you that is not the case. All you have to do is take a look at where Georgia is yet again at the end of the day when it comes to the recruiting rankings. Last year, Georgia finished with the number 2 class. The year before, they had the number 1. This year, back on top with the mythical number 1 recruiting class in the country, at least as rated by 2 of the 3 major outlets. As you can see, 247 has them at number 1. And if we bump right over here and take a look, you'll see that ESPN has them at number 1. And as I mentioned earlier, Rivals has them at number 2. But any way you want to slice it, this class, I mean, it's incredible for Georgia. I mean, it truly, truly is. Look at these names that you see on here. You see both a national footprint as well as a homegrown flavor. You see top tier 4 and 5 star players across the board. You see size, you see speed, but you also see a targeted approach. Where do we need help? Let's target those areas and make sure that we address them so that we'll be in a better position moving forward. This class, again, any way you slice it, is the kind of class that is going to make the rest of college football, as if they needed a reminder, very, very aware that the University of Georgia is not going anywhere. One of the names I haven't talked about so far would be Ryan Puglisi. I mean, what kind of class is it if you don't sign a top-tier quarterback? And Georgia did. There was another quarterback committed for a while to the University of Georgia, and we were all happy and excited that he had chosen to come to Athens. But at the end of the day, he decided to go somewhere else. That was never the case with Ryan. And many people, including, based on good intelligence, what every coach says inside the building, the quarterback that they felt was the better of the two was solid from day one until today when he signed his letter of intent to come to the University of Georgia. And that is Ryan Puglisi. He was never the other quarterback. The only people who were saying things like that were people who only lived in internet college football world. People who actually saw the young man play. People who are actually aware of what it takes to be successful. They always felt really good about Ryan. And Dog Nation feels really good about Ryan. Because again, from day one until now, he was locked in with Georgia. And there was never any back and forth. Where's he going to go? None of that. He knew where he wanted to be. He committed and it absolutely stuck. That kid's a dog and he wanted to be a dog. And that's the kind of player that Dog Nation loves to welcome in. Now, I spent a few minutes talking about the splash of the day, right? With KJ choosing to come to Athens. And we covered the fact that Georgia has the number 1 ranked class in the country. But one of the things that could be easily overlooked right here was a recruiting battle that the Dogs actually won earlier this week. And that was when Carson Beck decided that he was going to come back to the University of Georgia for another year to lead the Dogs in 2024. That is a massive, massive decision. And it had a ripple effect across the rest of the signing class for Georgia. It cannot be overstated how big of an impact it's going to have that Carson has decided to come back and play for the Dogs in 2024, because make no mistake, he put his name in to see where he was going to be drafted this year, or could potentially be drafted this year by some NFL franchise. And when the results came back, the way that works is you get 3 grades: first round, second round, or 3rd through 7. Carson's name was not in the 3rd through 7 group. He was going to be, if not a first day draft pick, a second day draft pick. And there seemed to be very, very little doubt about that. And that's in a class where everyone kept talking about how loaded it was with the number of quality quarterbacks that were coming out. Carson was still going to be a first or second round draft pick according to the NFL analysts and their projections. But he decided to come back to Athens for 2024. It's not like he wasn't going to make it in the NFL. He had a very viable option there. But he wanted to come back because he believed he had things he could work on, and he's chasing larger goals. Again, it cannot be overstated how massive this is for the continuity and the cohesion of this offense moving forward. Brock Bowers is not going to be suiting up in the red and black next year. Ladd McConkey not going to be wearing the Power G or the silver breeches next year. There are other players that will be back. Names we know: Dominic Lovett, Ra Thompson, Oscar Delp. Some new faces we're going to get to know. The wide receivers from last year's class are going to start to step up. There are players in Athens. What you don't want when you start to look ahead to 24 and the strength of schedule that Georgia's going to have to face is you don't want to have to be replacing Cedric Van Pran at center. You don't want to have to be replacing your starting right tackle and your quarterback and your running back and those 2 top-tier pass catchers that I just mentioned. That would spell not a very easy ride for whoever was taking snaps for Georgia in 24. But when Carson says he's coming back, now you've got somebody in the middle that's going to help direct traffic. He knows the offense backwards and forwards, and he still has plenty of weapons to work with. Oh, by the way, did I mention that Tate Ratledge is going to come back? He was an All-SEC performer, SEC performer this year, All-American performer this year. He's going to be back at guard. You've got Micah Morris, Dylan Fairchild. There's another guard. You've got your starting left tackle. He's coming back. You've got right tackle, probably in pretty good shape with Monroe Freeling out there. And you're going to figure out who your center is going to be. There are people there to take that role over. And now you have a veteran quarterback behind that young center to help them set the defenses and see how things are going to go, make the calls, direct traffic on that offensive line. Cannot be overstated what a big job of recruiting that was for Kirby Smart and this staff to get Carson to come back to Athens for one more year. That decision could be the linchpin in the Dogs' fortunes for 24. You could make an argument that with him choosing to come back, the Dogs are now absolutely a contender for the national title in 24 and quite possibly the favorite. He brings back experience. He's been on the road in the SEC, and now it's only going to get harder with road trips to Tuscaloosa and Austin on the schedule in 2024. He brings leadership. He was down on the road at Auburn. He was down at home to South Carolina. He knows what it's like to have to lead his team back. And the guys know who they're going to follow. And keep in mind, even though on this channel and in other places, people were telling you that Carson was going to be the starter this year, way back last spring, even prior to the spring game. We were telling you he was going to be the guy. But the fact of the matter is, there was a competition, and he was splitting reps. This year, going through a complete offseason where he's going to take every first-team rep. How much better is Carson Beck going to be come the fall? All that repetition with all of these new players that he's going to have to learn to lean on when things get tough. This spring, this summer, taking all those first-team reps, that's where that is all going to be built. Oh, by the way, Carson Beck returns to the University of Georgia in 2024 as the highest graded quarterback in the country that's coming back to play college football next season. The only two players that graded out higher than Carson Beck this season are now out of eligibility and will not be back in college football next year. So earlier when I talked about what sort of impact is it going to have on the Dogs' fortunes in 2024, that stat alone, then backed up by everything I just said regarding repetitions and timing and just getting to know his new weapons, those things are going to be crucial for how well the Georgia offense and the Georgia team do in 2024 overall. So the big news of the day, Kirby Smart, yet again, has hauled in a #1 recruiting class for the University of Georgia. And by convincing KJ Bolden to come on down and commit to the G and join the Georgia Bulldogs, Kirby once again has stepped up and said,
Told him, how about them f***ing dogs? That's what I told him.
And that's exactly how I feel. So with that, I'm going to put a bow on it and let you know that the future is bright in Athens. There are a lot of very, very talented young men coming to play between the hedges for our Dogs. And I, for one, am looking forward to watching them grow and become the kind of Dogs that we can all be happy and proud of to cheer for in the future. Happy signing day, everybody. We'll see you again soon. Go Dogs!
Told him, how about them f***ing dogs? That's what I told him.